In exploring the vision of Confucius, we started by introducing the umbrella concept of the Tao, or way. The Confucian way is shown to be rooted in a personal ideal, the ideal of the Junzi, who embodies the height of virtue. We are then led by the analects to examine the characteristics of the Junzi. We realize that the Junzi is a consummate master of Li, who recognizes the power of ritual action and proper conduct in shaping human behavior and establishing order in social life. But Li is then shown to be incomplete without Ren, and this is where we stopped the last time. Again, this is what the analects tells us. As a human being, and yet he lacks humanity or Ren, what has he to do with Li? In today's discussion, we will focus on the concept of Ren, one of the truly defining virtues of the ideal Junzi. Ren, first of all, has been variously translated as humanity, human-heartedness, humaneness, benevolence, goodness, perfect virtue, among others. In the analects, the word Ren is used over 100 times and is taken as the key characteristic virtue of the ideal Junzi. Let's just take a look at some examples. If a person sets his heart and mind firmly on Ren, the analect says, he will be free of malevolence. This indicates that Ren has the sense of benevolence in both intention and act. Or consider this passage. The Junzi never abandons Ren, not even for as short a time as it takes to finish a meal, which is to say that the cultivation of Ren is a constant process. Elsewhere in the analects, we find Confucius saying that men of Ren would not do anything contrary to Ren, just so to protect their own lives. On the contrary, they would be prepared to even sacrifice themselves in order to complete the work of Ren. This should show how important the concept of Ren is in the mind of Confucius. So what does Ren mean? We may start by looking at the word Ren itself, which is graphically formed by two components. A graph for a human being on the left and the symbol for the number 2 on the right-hand side. So, whatever Ren means, it is safe to say that it is always concerned with human social relations. It involves not only oneself, but others as well. Ren is defined in the analects in a number of ways. The simplest is this: love or care for others. The most famous probably is the so-called golden rule of Confucianism. And this is what the analects has to say. What you yourself do not desire, do not impose on or do to others. Some early Christian missionaries suggested that this should be called the silver rule instead, because it is put in a negative form, unlike the golden rule in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But there are positive formulations of this principle in the analects. For example, Confucius explains that a person of Ren, in wishing to establish himself, also establishes others. In wishing to distinguish himself, he also helps others to achieve distinction. Or equally explicit, the analect states, the master said, the Junzi gentleman brings out the best qualities in others. He does not help to bring out their bad qualities. A petty or morally deficient person does exactly the opposite. Now, in your readings, you may come across a debate on whether Ren should be understood as a particular or general virtue, as love or benevolence, Ren may be seen as a particular virtue, that is to say, as one distinct virtue among many others. In fact, this seems to be the basic meaning of Ren that is found in pre-Confucian writings. In this sense, although Ren may be the most important virtue, it is still one among others, alongside, say, trustworthiness and courage. But in the Analects, it seems that the term Ren is also used in a wider sense to suggest a fundamental moral principle that encompasses all virtues. That is, not a particular virtue, but an overarching, general, universal principle. Taking this wider meaning, some scholars therefore opt to interpret Ren as humanity. To me, these two senses of Ren are not mutually exclusive, and I think both meanings are present in the Analects. Again, perhaps the idea of a philosophical extension can be applied here. As in the case of the concept of Li, a deeper meaning of Ren also seems to emerge in the Analects. One possibility is that Confucius developed certain existing ethical concepts, bringing out the perceived deeper meaning and wider significance. Perhaps in the older sense of the term Junzi, referring to the aristocracy, it is important that the ideal ruler should possess benevolence and love for his people, together with other virtues such as courage. After all, the ancient Chinese believed that political rulership was granted by heaven, that the ruler was in his position only by virtue of the mandate of heaven he received, which dictates that the people must be well cared for. However, once the concept of the Junzi is turned into a universal human ideal, attention then needs to be shifted to what defines the ideal human being. This would encompass not only the nobility, but anyone who aspires to make a difference in an increasingly complex society. In any event, it is the more general meaning of Ren which I think is philosophically significant. And as a general virtue, Ren is seen to be closely related to Li. I think it should be clear how Li, on both the personal and social levels, requires Ren to become meaningful. Sincerity, affection, and genuine feeling are of course necessary to make a greeting or mourning or marriage ceremony meaningful. However, on the other hand, Ren must also find expression in Li. Just consider some simple examples. Can you, say, love someone without showing it? Diamond rings may not be necessary, but some outward signs seem essential. Is it all right in your view to be grateful to someone and yet not show it? And how do you show it? Shall we say, wildly embrace your colleague and shower kisses on him or her because you feel grateful? Probably not. Ren, in other words, must find proper expression in action, guided by Li. For this reason, Confucius emphasizes that to master or discipline oneself and return to Li is what constitutes Ren. Now, why must the self be disciplined or restrained? What does this imply? Does this presuppose a certain view of human nature? The Analects itself does not provide an answer to this question. Later interpreters of Confucius, however, as we will see in subsequent lectures, were to raise this precise question and to provide an answer for it. And that is why I am bringing up this issue here, just to anticipate our subsequent discussion. Again, we should not expect the Analects to be like a systematic treatise, addressing one problem after another and with one consistent definition for every concept. On the contrary, as in any conversation, the statements we find in the Analects are always context dependent. For example, if it is a question raised by a disciple, Confucius' answer often seems to take into account his strengths and weaknesses, intending with his answer to help develop that particular disciple. Nevertheless, the statements we find in the Analects do point to a consistent understanding of Ren, not only as a particular virtue akin to benevolence, but also as a general, all-encompassing virtue that is seen to define ideal humanity. We have now introduced the concepts of Li and Ren as the hallmark of the ideal Junzi gentleman. When we come back, the next question we should consider is the relationship between Ren and Li.